Welcome to Strategy Talk, where the editors of Strategy Page discuss current events with a splash of history. I'm Dan Masterson, host of Strategy Talk. With me today is the editor of Strategy Page, well-known military author and game designer Jim Dunnigan. Also joining us is the associate editor of Strategy Page, columnist and author Austin Bay.
Welcome, Jim and Austin. Iraq is facing a number of political issues. What's going to happen with Sadr, Jim?
Well, he's trying to play peacemaker, and it's not working out so well. So he is basically bowing out and leaving chaos in his wake. The problem is that his parties won the last national elections, but the pro-Iran parties basically are refusing to allow him to form a government. And that has basically caused a stalemate, which benefits Iran. And in response, Sadr has basically declared, neutrality. He's not going to fight anymore. Now, that's caused a stalemate, but, Iraq is no worse off because they have a choice between either continuing to struggle, and that allows the pro-Iranian PMF militias to fight, as it were, on their behalf. And, Sadr doesn't see any, benefit in that. So he's just, declaring himself neutral and letting the Iranians stew in their own juice. Now, that remains to be seen because they are armed and dangerous, and but they're not powerful enough to take over the country. So there we go. Stalemate. Stagnation.
So, Austin, this broke out into violence last month. And what's your take on this?
Well, Dan, this would be my first take. A better way to frame it. This broke out into obvious violence last month because some of this has been going on constantly, really, since 1991, and part of that was in the wake of Saddam's, Republican Guard killing all the Shia farmers and villagers in southern in southern Iraq, and the power play there comes from Iran, which was already trying to split Iraq along sectarian lines between Shia and Sunni, and also ethnic, against the Kurds who were Sunni as well. And it didn't work. You had the Iran-Iraq war that had been going on as well, and Saddam, managed to stabilize his situation and last at least until 2003. I'll tell a personal experience because I spent a good slug of 2004 on active duty in Iraq in 2004, and Sadr's Sadr's militia, nicknamed the Mookie militia, was one of the biggest thorns in the side of trying to establish a stable Iraqi federal government. He was Iran's man at the time. That's not only my take. That was the take of all coalition intelligence. Had him nailed as being supported out of Iran by by Iranian intelligence and the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, and though not tied to the Saddamist, Saddam supporters running their own insurgency, certainly not interested in stabilizing Iraq on quote unquote American terms. He played a card too because his father was a legitimate leader who was assassinated. But Muqtada, in not just my view, was a thug, an Iranian operative and he managed to escape total approbation for some of the attacks his militia was involved in, simply because of his father. He was talked out of participating in rejecting, and I forget the exact circumstance in this, but this was in late 2004 after I had left. Grand Ayatollah Ali al-Sistani, who's the preeminent Shia cleric in Iraq, who has been a force for real peace. It really has a vision of a peaceful, united Iraq where people can live, work, and tourists can come to visit Babylon and Sumeria. I'm not going off on a tangent with that. That's he doesn't appear in public. Back at in the first decade, his spokesmen were his nephew and his son-in-law. But I know from talking with some American and allied senior officers who had met with him, and primarily the British meeting with him, that was where the Grand Ayatollah, that was what he wanted, and he made it known to the Shiites, and he's really the he still is, single most powerful actor in Iraq, and I mean in terms of having personal force and personal respect. He was ill in 2004. He's ill in 2002, and I think he's 94 years old. As a matter of fact, last month during where the fighting suddenly, brought Iraq back to the major media headlines, I read one short article talking about Sistani had been talking to Sadr again. Because maybe Jim says, that Sadr is now, a force for neutrality. Whether Sadr's given up, I believe, on actually being the chief power broker. But Sistani convinced him again, don't be the bad actor. Unfortunately, as Jim said, and this comes out of the war against the Islamic State, where those pro-Iranian militias really, they did carry on heavy fighting against the Islamic State. But they really are creatures of Iran. And Jim already touched on what the issues are with Iran. The Iranian regime is despised in Iran. We've covered that. I think the last time we talked about that maybe was late last year. It really hasn't changed. As a matter of fact, there's even more evidence that the government's even more despised, if that's possible. I'm talking about the Iranian government than it was last year, because it has continued to do nothing for the Iranian people, but wants nuclear weapons so that it can threaten the Saudis and the Israelis and I suppose even the Turks. But the one thing they can do, and this is something else we've talked about on Strategy Talk, is the Iranians make a living causing trouble. As Jim called it, I think their meddling operations, violent meddling is the way to describe it. You see that in Yemen. You see that in southern Lebanon. You see it in Syria. You're seeing it in Iraq again. And they have also pursue it no longer as obviously and successfully as they did in the Balkans. The Turks more or less shut them down about 3 years ago by catching about 100 Iranian agents in a big operation that both the Turkish gendarmerie and MIT, their intelligence service. And that kind of quietly shut down a lot of Iranian troublemaking in Turkey. I would advise the Iranians to pick on somebody else other than the Turks. Just let Erdogan be crazy instead of giving him another target. So I hope that I made something out of that. Sadr is, for a number of reasons, has sidelined himself. Some good, some bad. But there is a power vacuum that the federal government, such as it is, can't fill. And the Iranians are trying to fill it, but they've got their own problems.
Jim, Iraq is still facing some problems with terrorists, right, from ISIS?
Yes,
Or
but Sadr has become a nationalist, and he will fight against Islamic State.
Well, he did fight against them. His guys fought against them, Jim.
I know, but he basically is also, that's a secondary enemy. He's mainly, a nationalist against Iran. He tried, being aligned with Iran, and he found out the Iranians were only there for Iran. He long time believed in this the Shia, internationalism. But he found out quickly that eventually that the Iranians are basically out for Iran at the expense of anybody who gets in the way. And so, as Austin pointed out, Sadr has now declared himself neutral because he says, there's no point in fighting the Iranians because ultimately they're never going to gain control of Iraq. And, basically he's going to, Sadr's going to let, everybody else, join the opposition, as it were, until the Iranians realize that, they're outnumbered, they're disliked. Now, one thing that's changed is the Iranians have supported Russia in Ukraine. And they've been sending them weapons. They have an easy connection. They can basically ship across the Caspian Sea. Both Russia and Iran have ports on the that inland sea, and they've been shipping weapons, UAVs, the ones they've been using to attack the Saudis and everybody else in Yemen. Turned out those UAVs weren't as effective as Iran told the Russians they were. I mean, that's been demonstrated in Ukraine. Now, that may just be the fact that the Ukrainians are much more competent fighters than any other opposition the Iranians have gone after. So they're sort of regretting that. But they basically, made this alliance with Russia, and they expect that to yield long-term benefits, once the Ukrainian war is over. So a lot depends on, how quickly the Ukrainians win. Right now they're winning. And as they are winning, that means, Sadr and the Iranians are losing. So it's one of those interesting situations where you have intertwined conflicts, which is not unusual in the Middle East. But now it involves, a European country, namely Ukraine, and the Ukrainians are doing pretty well for themselves. So they may be the ultimate downfall of Iranian ambitions, throughout the region, especially in the Middle East, where they concentrate.
Austin, is there any chance of outright military conflict between Iran and Iraq?
Is there a chance? Yes. Is it likely? That's a tough call. There is a low-grade war going on right now, but it's being waged inside Iraq by the Iranians, and they've been doing that really since, it depends on when you want to start the clock, but the clock definitely starts in 2003. Here's one of the dimensions of it, and if there were another administration in power, I would think the Iraqis would be able to rely on an American support, immediate American support, if the Iranians launched an overt attack. That had been part of the agreement, withdrawal in what was that, 2011 during the Obama administration, and certainly the Obama administration filled it by providing support against the Islamic State in the Trump administration, even after coming in and saying we're going to withdraw everybody out of Syria and elsewhere, still maintained a presence in part to fight the Islamic State, but also it provides, and this is something that from the you'll get from the Kurds, Sunni Arab Iraqis and Shia Iraqis, is that, you know, no matter what we actually say, having the United States and remnant coalition partners there's seen as we're seen, the U.S. is seen as a fair arbiter, and actions over time have borne that out. That's why one of the things going on when the actual withdrawal was negotiated, and at the time, the now Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, but he was I think he was CENTCOM commander at the time. He had a nightlight force, as it was called. He was going to leave about 10,000 soldiers, American soldiers, in Iraq as a residual force, really for political effects. But the Obama administration nixed it. I think Austin's analysis was correct, and the rise of the Islamic State and its blitzkrieg bore that out. One other thing, and I'll come back to this in a minute, the corruption of the Maliki government was something that led to the success of the Islamic State. The Maliki government started appointing Shia officers, not on merit, but to these units, and it was part of a shutout operation on Sunnis, and that was one of the reasons some of the units, Iraqi army units, collapsed so quickly when the Islamic State broke in from Syria, and that traces back that Maliki had a lot going for him in 2007 and 2008. But by 2014, he reverted to standard issue. I don't know, I've heard Jim use other words for this. I mean, standard issue, Middle Eastern systemic corruption. I don't know if that's not Dunnigan's line, but that describes it. And interestingly enough, one of his more effective critics, and this has been pointed out in a couple of strategy page posts on Iraq this summer, was Muqtada Sadr. And here's Sadr, who I tell you in 2004, he was Iran's man. He's come back with, a quote unquote anti-corruption fight. Now, the person who had been pushing anti-corruption was Ayatollah Ali al-Sistani. He had sermons on the issue of we must be honest in our dealings, because he says he based it on spiritual values, but he also says look what it does, how it holds us back. So I'm not going to tie it one to one, because Muqtada had been really almost a criminal leader himself, but he came out as an anti-corruption advocate against Maliki. And then here's another one when Jim says, the multiple little wars and conflicts within conflicts. Here's this guy who is now, I don't want to fight anymore. I'm going to withdraw and be neutral. But one of the positives that he's had on the political field there in Iraq is we've got to do something about the corruption. And he's a Shia. And, they're still the most powerful group within Iraq. Is he mouthing what Sistani preaches? Maybe. But he's also took some action when he was, what was he, prime minister for a while? He was, I'm talking about Muqtada. Iraq has not had an opportunity, and in a large sense, it's the corrupt Iraqis' fault to stabilize and become a positive force for their own people as well as the region. And Iran really doesn't want them to succeed because, as Jim said, Iran is still wedded to this global Shia Islamic revolution, which Muqtada has finally grown up and realized that that's just Iranian Tehran propaganda, and that's really what it is, to try to make themselves global leaders and recover the great being center of the universe when they were the Persian Empire. It sounds crazy, but that's really a lot of the motive out of Tehran and out of the leadership in Iran. They still see themselves as why aren't we the most powerful nation in the entire region? We were in 480 BC. So I'm not trying to explain it, Dan. I'm just saying that that's one of the things that's in play. The way the golden age of Persia, Iran, Arianistan is really what it is. Arianistan was. They're trying to recover a golden age, and that Islamic revolution garbage that Khomeini produced was their that was their ideology. And Muqtada believed it at one time. He doesn't now.
So, Jim, who fills Sadr's place as he steps to the side?
Well, basically nobody. The Iranians had never had enough clout, and they bought most of their clout. They exploited the Iraqi, corruption as much as they could. And so anybody was willing to, take the Iranian money and at least be at the very least neutral, but more preferably active in carrying out the Iranian efforts to control Iraq, benefited. And this is something, Sadr has basically become fed up with. He says, until the Iraqi people realize that the real enemy is corruption, and without the corruption, the Iranians would be a lot weaker inside the country. Now, there's something else you can't underestimate, is the ethnic component of this. The Iranians are, Indo-European, and for a long time they held themselves aloof, as it were. They were the regional superpower. But in a moment of weakness, as it were, they were defeated by the newly formed Islamic armies. Islam was developed in the 7th century, right? And one of their targets was Iran. And surprise, they caught the Iranians at a weak moment. Now, what the Iranians responded to that eventually. There were two factions in Islam. One was the Shia, which are a minority. About 10% of all Muslims are Shia. 90% or 80% are Sunni. Now the problem is the Sunnis are divided among themselves. The ones worldwide, the ones who are Arab, consider themselves superior to the non-Arab Sunnis, which doesn't, gain them a lot of popularity. That was a problem in Afghanistan, where the Afghans accepted the support of Al Qaeda and whatnot, these other Arab-dominated Islamic terrorist organizations, but they quickly soured on that because the Al Qaeda, the Arab-dominated Al Qaeda, looked down on the Afghans, and the Afghan attitude was, nobody looks down on us. So the Iraqis are facing that same problem. Unless they can overcome, especially with the Kurds. The Kurds are Sunnis, but they're Indo-European. That's a big difference because they never got into this Islamic extremism, fundamentalism, and that put them at odds with a lot of the Sunni radicals, both in Saudi Arabia and in their efforts and in the Sunni efforts to gain control of Iraq. Iraq was never more than 20%, Sunni Arab. About 20% were Kurds, and the other 60% were Shia. The Iranians switched to Shia Islam to differentiate themselves from the Arabs, who basically, and still believe that, Sunni Islam is the only way to go. And if you're an Arab Sunni Muslim, you are superior to all other Sunnis. And so the Arabs, Sunni Arabs, shoot themselves in the foot, because now you have the Iranians are basically the defender of Shia everywhere, and that gives them a lot of credit, as it were. They're not they're not anti-corruption as much as they should be, but that's where Sadr comes in. He says, why not? We are basically the one group that can make a dent in the corruption that has been weakening, Iraq, for centuries, making it a potential pawn of the alien Iranians. So it's not only a religious war, it's also an ethnic war, and it's a war of ancient rivalries. Before Islam came along, nobody could really compete with the Zoroastrian, the Mithra. They worship the sun god. In many ways, even though they're Muslims now, they still practice a lot of the old Mithraic customs and what have you, which annoys conservative Muslims in Iran, but there's really nothing they can do about it. But you still have that constant conflict between the Iranians and the Arabs and the Kurds, and this is not ending in Iraq, because now you have this perpetual civil war, which nobody is winning.
Austin, where does this go from here?
Dan, I think I touched on that early on. I really don't want to. Here's what I suspect. I'm not making a prediction, but I suspect we're going to see this kind of turmoil continue for at least 2 or 3 years. And I don't think it's going to get out of quote unquote out of hand into a shooting war between Iran and Iraq. The Iranians really are under a lot of other pressures, and that includes facing the Israelis and the Gulf Arabs, who are now quasi allies from the Abraham Accords, over the nuclear warfare issue. The one reason that I see this, and I'm not trying to predict the future by just predicting the present on this, is that international organizations, UN, world powers that have been involved, the U.S. Specifically, everybody right now is focused either on Ukraine or, in the case of the United States and its Pacific allies, the rising threat of China. And Iraq is something like Iraq's problems with Iran and internal problems, old news. And a lot of people have said the corruption issue is essential to fundamental to your problems. Again, I credit Grand Ayatollah Ali al-Sistani with that. He was delivering that message, even when he was too respected and too powerful for Saddam to get rid of, and he was delivering that message then. He was delivering it after Saddam fell, and now Tata Sadr, as he leaves middle age and enters senior citizen status or approaches it, has picked up on something Sistani has been preaching to everyone. Sistani preached it to Maliki when Maliki was prime minister. That's what I was trying to get earlier on. I think I implied that McDonough was PM. No, it was Maliki and his. Well, I did say that because he was prime minister when Islamic State overran it. Maybe he may have been president because of the way they reorganized the government. Don't hold me on the facts of the office, but he was the man in charge, and it was rank corruption, and it destroyed them, and it still is. And now, again, the interesting thing is that Sadr has picked up on it, and as Jim pointed out, and as in one of the posts on updates on Iraq that's on the website points out is that he not only was pushing it, he's willing to use force, and he was pointing it at Maliki, because there are a couple of conversations that were taped and then leaked of senior officials, a member of parliament, and then Maliki or Maliki staff as well, making deals and crooked deals, several $100,000, if not more. And, essentially that's treating their positions as if it were a piggy bank. And it damages Iraq. That kind of behavior damages every country. And heaven knows, unfortunately, we have it going on in the United States as well. But the thing is, the United States has got stronger institutions, and Iraq's institutions are fragile at best. And even though that there's some, as the Iraqis, Kurds, and Shia and Sunni all say, we have no reason to be impoverished and under threat. We've got water. We've got oil. We've got a comparatively educated population. We have industrial capability. All we need is stability, and that's what they can't get. And of course, their enemy to the east, the Iranians, don't want that because they could not stand seeing an Arab Kurd economic and political success on their own border. That would undermine, as if they're not undermining themselves, the Iranian revolutionary government. That's so I just, that's a roundabout way, but touching on a number of factors in it, and seeing this thing continue to simmer and never quite boil over. I could be dead wrong tomorrow, major revolution, but I don't know who's going to bring it about, and because of the divisions and lack of centralizing authority.
Well, that's a good place to leave it this morning, and we'll talk to you gentlemen next time.
Okay, guys.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.